Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, I know many of you have heard of the situation with the unemployment benefits during this administration and during the post-COVID, what was expected to be a post-COVID boom. There was a jobs report that was released last week, and the jobs report was expected to be at least up 1 million jobs, and unfortunately, it was way below that. It was about 120,000 plus jobs that had been added to the economy. And there are people who are playing the blame game now. There are people who are pointing the finger at Biden, and Biden's pointing the finger at lack of childcare and lack of vaccinations. All of this stuff that makes no sense in my opinion, and I'll explain why in a moment. But what no one is really looking at here is the role that unemployment benefits play in the sort of symbolism of government authority in American society. So let me just run down the critiques here. Many people on the right are criticizing Biden for allowing people to have unemployment benefits in lieu of actually having a job. The argument is that dependency sets in when these benefits are allowed to flow forth like myrrh and passions, like a river just going into the land, just flowing forth and taking everything away. And there is a hint of validity to this criticism. I do think that all kinds of welfare, including unemployment benefits, can indeed lead to dependency. But the problem here is, I think that critique doesn't go far enough. That critique looks at the surface and presumes the surface to be the whole of the issue. And when you look at the surface and presume the surface to be the whole of the issue, what happens? Well, what happens is you get a very narrow understanding of the phenomenon that you're critiquing, and therefore you're not critiquing it at its highest level. You're missing a lot. You're critiquing a part of it. If I saw a certain part of a river, if I say a river goes 100 miles and I only see about 2 miles of it, and I say, this river looks rough, when on the other side of the river it could be pretty calm, I'm not understanding the river at its fullest extent. Similarly, for Biden to say that lack of childcare, and lack of vaccinations are the two driving forces that are keeping jobs down is nonsense, I would say. Number one, the kind of childcare that Biden wants America to have, is childcare that is universal and provided by the federal government. That, in no instance, is a reality that America has really ever seen. This is an aspirational quality that Biden has appended to the destinies of Americans. And the problem with appending aspirational qualities to the destiny of Americans is that the aspirational qualities don't correspond to reality. And Biden is making a statement about a condition in reality, but he's doing so with something that is not, that is a fantasy. Universal child care has not existed in America, and it probably will not exist for a very long time. It's possible to come into fruition one day, but that is not the idea has no bearing on what is going on right now with jobs numbers. And the vaccinations, I just don't think most employers are not even requiring the vaccinations. So these explanations, again, are very, very narrow. But we have to understand what lies beneath, as I always say, my friends. What principle do unemployment benefits represent? Well, it seems obvious to me. They represent a sort of paternalistic role that requires centralized authority to expand to the private sector of society. What do I mean by that? Well, all of us have our own individual lives, our own individual families, our own individual homes. All of us have a life that is private. And the government, when they say we're going to give you unemployment benefits, go into your private life and try to seize control of it in a certain way. Because the moment you go on those benefits is the moment your life is dictated by the terms of a bureaucrat, that is centralized authority, that makes you subject to centralized authority, not dependency, subjugation. But think about this as well. The conditions that led to the need, or the ostensible need — I don't think there was a need for unemployment benefits, in my opinion. There was a need for the economy to be open and to be unobstructed by government tyranny. But the quote-unquote ostensible need for unemployment benefits was linked directly towards governments using their conceptual authority to coax businesses into shutting down if they didn't outright force them and fine them, like the governor of Oregon did to their business. This is an entirely artificial process. And in the midst of that artificial process, the government stepped in and tried to act as if it was a savior. Do you understand what that symbolizes? It essentially rejects the fundamental principle of American ontology, American being. That is the frontier mentality. That is the mentality of self-reliance. That is the mentality of independence. And it imposes to replace that mentality with one that is amendable towards centralized authority. A consequence of this is most certainly dependence, sure, but the bigger story is obedience, subjugation. The idea that if unemployment benefits did not exist, or that certain social programs did not exist, Americans would be left to the dogs, is an idea that is very accepted in many circles, even amongst people who claim to be on the right. This idea is very accepted, which is why the essential programs of government spending, like Social Security, are behind a wall that demands they are mandatorily funded. They are not in the government's discretionary budget because they are considered these sacred cows, these sort of things that we worship because they are supposedly indispensable to our ability to live. But when someone says that a government program is indispensable to my ability to live, what they're really saying is that force and coercion are indispensable to my ability to live. And if you really think about it, force and coercion are the opposite of the conditions that make life flourish. Force and coercion are the opposite of the conditions that allow Americans to continue and cement their place in this world. Force and coercion are the opposite of the foundations that America was founded upon. And yet, force and coercion, unemployment benefits are the outgrowth of that. We cannot conceptualize a world in which private industry and philanthropy and charity supplement and supplant government giving you stuff, government subjugation of your being and your desires beneath its foot, because that is the world we've had since the progressive era. Unemployment benefits, my friends, simply represent that kind of benevolent so-called tyranny. And the fact that so many of us acquiesce and accept it and simply use, or if we don't accept it, we simply use the dependency argument and don't focus on the very core root of it, show us just how effective the government has been in implanting the social and implanting this sacred cow into our system. So, what do? We simply recognize that charity exists way independent of government action, and that you do not need the government to survive. You simply need to have your creative energies uninhibited to survive. But I guess the government obstructs that and has obstructed that through the course of this COVID-19 pandemic. Think on it. As always, my friends, I love you, and if you want to donate to me, please, patreon.com/officialcwatson and PayPal, which is officialcwatson@gmail.com. I love you, and stay pensive. Bye-bye.